10 or 15 years. I've been in it for 36 years now. But I had the opportunity to happen, for whatever the reason, be in a context where I was dealt with a lot of people, some of them my very close friends, that were alcoholic. And then some that got into drugs. And then some of you here may be able to relate to some of this yourself. And I wanted to learn as much as I could about this. I was asked to participate in an intervention, so I went to some training on that. And the next thing you know, I started studying about it, and I wanted to learn more and more. And in my studies, it's interesting, I came to the conclusion that the addict, the alcoholic, the overeater, there are all kinds of different kinds of addictions, vacuum cleaning addiction, washing your hands too much addiction, all of these things. I kind of began to get the idea that whoever has this kind of compulsion, whatever one it happens to be, they really must feel that the addiction is worth whatever the price is that they're paying. And I studied John Bradshaw, and he's long gone now, I guess, but this is many years ago, and he was an alcoholic. He was a Catholic priest that finally left the priesthood, and then he became very active in the alcoholic community, the AA community. And he had a definition that I like very much. And let me see if I can remember it. He says, addiction is the obsessive compulsive attachment to something without which we don't feel we can survive. Think about that. Now, that may be pretty extreme. I can say, well, I can survive. Well, the obsessive compulsive attachment to something that we don't think we can do without. And that's really it. And you may not totally agree with that, and if you don't agree with that, that's fine. But take it and look at that and ask yourself, are there obsessive compulsive drives that I have that are inhibiting my ability to be able to be fully expressed in this life? And I think there are. Wow, is that a judgment on every one of you, isn't it? Well, not so much a judgment, I think, as an observation of people in my experience, and that includes me. I think that's a primary problem in civilization. The time when we finally overcome anything to which we are attached is the time when we are free, we are open. Then we can move into a full sense of the reality of who we are, which are, each one of us is a God-child made in the image and likeness that made everything else. But setting that aside, you may not like that broad categorization of you, but the change in lives come when we realize that the cost is just too great. You see, this change of attitude, the change of awareness, it sets us on a more useful course, a more positive course. And one of the problems is we get into, and I talked a little bit about this last week, we get into classifying our behaviors as good or bad. And that traps us. And if you remember what little bit I talked about it last week, I'm going to elaborate on some more this morning here, that when we start classifying things as good or bad, oftentimes this causes us to avoid whatever the issue is about which we're making that judgment. You see, if we look at something, say, in ourselves as this is bad, then what we've done is we don't want to associate with that is bad. And so it's like we encapsulate it over here and it doesn't get dealt with. If we just change the terminology that we use to examine whatever the incidents are in our life, like, for instance, the terms I used last week. Stop looking at things as good and bad and think of useful and non-useful. That which adds value and that which maybe doesn't or extracts value. Do you see the difference there? Because to think in terms of useful or non-useful does not have a moral connotation associated with it, where bad or good does. You are morally okay. You are not morally okay. That creates such a separation. But this is useful and this is not useful. Now, this allows us to look at what's going on. And what you do, what you observe may be faulty. Maybe all kinds of mistakes that are involved in this. But there's the realization also that I, as a person, am okay. So I made a mistake. So what? And as you begin to understand this, you can extend that same kind of consideration to other people. And it becomes so much easier to be able to evaluate situations clearly and look at the positive and the negative of it from a standpoint of not good or bad, but what is useful and what is not useful. What adds value? What doesn't add value? And out of that comes a kind of self-motivation, that something that gets you to move toward that which it is you want to experience in your life. And the reason that it leads to this kind of self-motivation is that shorn of the judgments that we so often carry with us, we begin to see that there's meaning and purpose